welcome to everybody who's called in. We'll just wait a few more minutes to see who else might call in, then we'll get started. Welcome, everybody. It's a couple minutes after 8, so why don't we just kind of slowly get started here. My name's Kevin O'Brien. I'm here with Kathy Kafka, and the idea of this webinar is to kind of give an idea to folks about the version 3 SOCAT QC system for those that may have done version 2 but haven't seen the version 3 system, and also for those that are just brand new to the SOCAT process. So I don't know, Kathy, do you want to go around and do a roll call, or should we just move forward?
We can just move forward.
Okay.
Or let's do a roll call.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Again, Kevin O'Brien.
Kathy Kafka.
Lisa Robbins.
It's Glenn Eugene here.
I know more than that on the phone.
Hunt.
Beamer.
Now, how do we get the, is this the speakerphone? Oh, sure.
We'll just go ahead and get started. For those of you who have called in, maybe put yourself on mute so we don't have any background noise, and then if you have questions, you can unmute. That'll make it easier, and we won't have any echoes that way. So the idea of this seminar is to kind of give people an introduction into the SOCAT version 3 QC system. So Kathy and I are going to kind of tag team this effort to show a few things about logging into the version 3 QC interface. Talk about the version 3 and some of the new features, or not necessarily new features in some cases, but sort of moved features that aren't where they were in the version 2 interface. So you'd kind of go through how to find cruises by individual cruises, and then how to select a cluster of cruises. And then Kathy's going to take over and show you, kind of go through the basic process of doing QC. So I hope that this will be informative, and we hope that it will help people to using the system, but at the same time also kind of invigorate people to get some QC done, so we can get the SOCAT version 3 data collection out sometime next summer. So the thing I want to talk about is just how to log into the SOCAT version 3 QC interface. You can see in the second slide of the presentation here. We'll just leave it there because I'm going to have to turn it off anyway, but there's the to log into the PML virtual private work system to get into the QC system. That's what the page looks like. Here's the actual page. For us, if you don't have a NOAA person, you can just use NOAA LDAP ID. If you're a NOAA person, we need to assign you an ID. In any case, you need to have an account activated on the SOCAT version 3 system. So if you don't have an activation, you'll send us an email, and we'll let you know the emails at the end of the session. for me, since I'm a NOAA person, I can just log in with my LDAP username, password, which is password, as far as anyone knows. And we have the SOCAT version 3. This is the SOCAT homepage, the local SOCAT homepage here that's hosted here at PNL. There's some help information on this homepage that's worth looking at. There's a SOCAT version 3 QC cookbook, which Kathy's going to talk about a little bit later. There's some alternate sensor QC paper. And then there's a series of several, 3 different videos which are designed to help kind of go through the same information we're going to go through today, but are on so that you can access those at any time. Version 3 QC editor is what we're going to talk about today, so we'll click and log into that. I've already logged into that today, so it remembered my login, but you'll have a SOCAT login that you'll have to enter, and that's how we know who is actually doing the QC, and we can associate the QC changes with that person. I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger, but a little more visible here. So here's version 3. This is the version 3 sort of QC homepage. This is, for those of you that have done version 2 QC, this is a little different than the version 2 QC. Many of the constraints that were at the bottom of the version 2 QC homepage have been moved over to this left side of the interface. And we'll go through that in a minute. You'll see that this plot, the time range of this initial plot has been limited to the last 5 years. This is simply to provide better response upon initial entry into the system. We have data all going all the way back to 1957, and to see that data just change to the time widget selectors. You can see that the reason we're doing this is there's so much data. There's a lot of data in the system now. Even the last 5 years, we have approximately 8 million observations. So, of pulling that data out of the data management framework and plotting it can take some time. But that's where you can change the time range. And here's, I mentioned, we moved the constraints from the bottom of the face in version 2 to over to the left side here in version 3. This is where you can actually get to export codes of different cruises, where you can see reload them from the server there. We can SOCAT region, so there's the various different SOCAT regions that are selectable. Different kinds of metadata, for example, investigators. We can select on investigators and search through the list of investigators. And I'll do some of this, show you some examples of this in a minute. I'm just going to sort of introduce the interface now. The text search is a free text search, so it will do a free text search on any of the various components, expo code, investigators, organization, or vessel name. So that will help you find a group of cruises. By season selector, which will allow you to select various months of which a cruise may have made observations. You can select March. That the only other selections I can make are February and April. So I can't make a selection in May, but if I select April, then I can select May. So it's consecutive months. You can do any sequence of those consecutive months. And we get constraints to a particular variable, so you may just want to see where FCO2 recommended, for example, is greater than a certain amount. We can add those in this constraint here. And the data constraint means that we can look for data where only a particular parameter is been measured or is valid. So we might just want to see where only the FCO2 recommended values are actually valid. And as I selected a few constraints when I was selecting the season constraints, you'll notice that up in this My Selections box, the constraints were added there. And this is where you'll have your whole list of constraints that you are added, and those are the ones that will be operating on the data to provide the plot on the plot that's right next to it. And notice that up here, the Update Plot button is red. That added these two constraints, April, March. I have not actually recreated the plot, so this red button is to tell you that your plot is sort of out of date with the constraints that you've made. Just sort of things to notice as you go along. I'll remove those constraints for now. The thing to note, we have two different maps here. We can zoom in on particular regions in a couple ways. We can select the region by region ID and the data. We can also do it by latitude and longitude selection. So we can, with this icon on the map, if you click that, you can create a region on the map. and hit plot, and it will only plot the cruises that are in that region for this small time range of 2009 to 2014. You can also draw on the map itself to further delve down into the data, and again hit the update plot button, and you'll see that it will zoom into that selected region we have picked up. Come ahead and in order to get back to the full region, there's this on button here that's reset map, and it has, looks like kind of two arrows pointing at each other. If you click that, it will reset the latitude and longitude specifications to the full range. And then update plot, and we'll get the full range of data back. Questions so far? Great. Another interesting point about the interface is this pull-down menu here will list all of the various parameters that are available in the data set. And so to change parameters, you simply just select down and pick, for example, sea surface temperature. And once in the update plot button turns red, so we click on that, and we'll plot of the sea surface temperatures from those same cruises we were just looking at. I'll switch back to FCO2 because that's the most interesting piece of this. So now that we have sort of a general, well, actually, one more thing I want to point out. In the upper part here, you see annotations. This describes the data collection. It talks how many trajectories are actually on the plot that we're showing. It tells you how many observations that those trajectories entail. It also talks about subsampling. So we are subsampling this data only for the graphics parts of it in order to get better performance. There's no way that you can logically look at 8 million observations on a map this size. So we have a algorithm that subsamples the data but doesn't lose any of the minimums and maximums. And if you're interested to learn more about that, there's an explanation link on there that will go through and explain exactly the piecewise linear approximation algorithm that we are using to reduce the data volume for plotting. Annotations can be removed or are just hidden. This little X in the corner here, so that allows you to kind of move them out of the way and make it maybe a more cleaner face. If you don't need to see the annotations, you can bring back by hitting the annotations button in the upper left-hand corner here, and hitting that again will also remove them. Annotation, there's a whole series of links, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. Some of these contain the links that will take you into the table of cruises, for example, the thumb plots, and the correlation viewer, as well as a print link. So if you find a plot that you're interested in printing, you can go ahead and hit print, and that will open up a window that is printable with the annotations also associated with that. That's sort of the basic out of the QC interface. It's a little bit different than version 2, but we think it's a little more elegant, a little more compact, and we hope that it will provide more efficiency in getting through the data. Is there any questions? Okay. So let's start by looking at just kind of how would we go about sort of identifying cruises that we would want to QC. I meant that we can look for individual cruises, and these are listed by expo code. If you begin to look for a particular cruise, you can start typing into the filter box if you don't want to have to scroll through the long list of expo codes. So if we're interested in some of the Kaimi Moana cruises, we can start by typing in its expo code, which is 33 km. You'll see that the list starts filtering to show only those cruises that start with 33 km. And if you're interested in the 2010 cruises, we can reduce the list by that, and then we can find the cruise that we're interested in. Click it. You can see it's added to the My Selections box and hit the update plot. And so looking at the Kaima Moana cruise from 2000 to 2014, there may be more data in that, but that's the time range I just happen to have limited to now. If we zoom in on that, again, we can just click and drag around that cruise and zoom in on the map. And so the cruise data, and in order to kind of start doing QC, we might want to look at the thumbnail plots. We have a series of thumbnail plots that will be created when you hit the thumbnail button here on the upper right-hand side of the interface. we'll create a whole series of thumbnail plots of property plots that show various parameters. And if you hover over the you'll see that, if, for example, this one is longitude versus time. Here we have FCO2 recommended versus time. This is equator chamber temperature versus time. So the whole list of thumb plots are kind of to try and help identify sort of flyers or outliers. When you see something that you might be interested in flagging, you would go ahead and click on the individual plot that you're interested in, bring that data up in the correlation viewer, and this will allow you to kind of examine the information a little bit more closely, more in depth. This is also the place where you'll be editing flags, and Kathy will talk about that, so I won't go into that right now. And also in this interface, apply constraints to parameters. So if you're really interested in seeing FCO2, let's say less than 440, you can type that in here, hit apply, and very similar to the other side, the other main interface, you'll see your selection showing up here in this My Selections box. It turns red to indicate that you need to update plot with the new constraint, and we have the new that's just showing the FCO2 recommended that's less than 440. You can change how the plots are colored. For example, right now we're showing FCO2 recommended as a function of time colored by expo code. This could be interesting if there's more than one expo code, but since there's only a single expo code, we might want to look at it colored by a different parameter, for example, sea surface temperature. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll hit update plot button, and we'll see the FCO2 as a function of time, but now it's colored by the sea surface temperature observations that are associated with those measurements. So we can kind of go through the process of looking at an individual cruise, and again, Kathy will show you from this point how you would set some flags. I'll go back to the main interface, and I'm going to get rid of this constraint and show you. I'll re-update the plot, and I'll show you how to find a group of cruises that might be easier to work. I'm going to go ahead and go to the range here. So there were these constraint boxes over here that will help us kind of constrain the data. One of the ways to find multiple cruises is if you're interested in a particular region, for example, the tropical Atlantic or the North Atlantic. We'll select those. We'll see them show in my selection box. Go ahead and update plot, and this will show us all the cruises within 2009 to 2014 time range that are in those two basins that we're interested in. Again, hit the thumbnail product, which will bring up thumbnail plots for the cruises. It will show one cruise at a time, and as soon as they show up here, I'll show you how you can kind of scroll down the expo code by expo code. So the plot coming up, creating the various thumbnails. Then you have the list of all the expo codes that were included in that plot of the tropical and North Atlantic, and so if you were interested in a different expo code, you could just scroll down to that one and update plot. You can also filter the expo code similar to what we have on the main interface to help make it a little easier to find what you're looking for. To get to a group of cruises, another way is to remove those constraints. Another way by that free text search that I mentioned. If you type into the free text search box a string, any kind of string, for example, 3KM, because we know that the expo code for the Kimi Moana, and we hit apply, that will show up in the My Selections saying look for anything that has the 33KM in the expo code. We'll go ahead and hit the update plot button, and we'll see the Taimi Moana cruises during this time frame that show up. We can again hit the thumbnail plot. We can get the various thumbnail plots for that small list of expo codes that we were just looking at in the main page. So that way we can get to these. Also search by investigators, for example. There's various different types of metadata we can look at. And WOTAGs, investigators, organizations. If interested in investigators, we can say look for data from Rick Wanikoff and add him to our constraints, hit the update plot, and there's no available, but we know Rick has been incredibly busy working hard. There's no data available. Well, I did this on purpose because I wanted to illustrate one of the common traps that we found. You'll notice in the My Selections box that we have the expo code that we are searching for on the Kaima selected. So sometimes when you're adding constraints, you might forget that you have a constraint in there, and it might result in this no data available plot. So you want to make sure your plot is your data is actually you're looking at it you actually want to, and you remove the constraints that you don't want. So when I remove the Kaima Moana expo code constraint, we'll see that yes, in fact, Rick and his team have been incredibly busy making SOCAT observations. From here, another link I just want to show you and walk through you first is the kind of a last step here is the table of cruises. This is where a lot of the QC will sort of originate. So this table of cruises that come up will list all these cruises that we have in this plot here, and you can see because we were looking for Rick Wanikoff as the PI, he'll be the one that's on all of these cruises. There's a lot of information in this table. The expo code, the vessel name, the investigator, the QE flag, and in this case, most of these cruises we're looking at are either updated or new. There's a documentation link that will, when you click on it, will take you to a list of documentation for all the 33GG expo codes. And you can see that there's a cruise report and a README, and I don't know if it's coming through on the WebEx, but these are colored differently for each separate cruise. So this bunch of cruises is blue and this is white. So the background changes so we can kind of differentiate the various cruises. You can look at the data, the CF file, and Noah's afraid of PDF, so I have to manually run the plugin. And you can see information for the cruise that will help you perform the metadata, that QC that needs to be done. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Bring back the table of cruises. There's a lot of other information in the table of cruises as well. This is where we can download some of the data. So if you're interested in getting the data from one of the cruises, you download it in NetCDF format or CSV format. So for example, if I hit the CSV format, it will ask me if I want to save a Microsoft Excel comma-separated values file. I'll go ahead and save it. And once it's here, I can just double-click on that and open it up into Excel. And that you've asked to download in CSV format. So check for crossovers from this from this page. So if I hit the check for crossovers, it will go out and check and see if there are any. It tells you there are none there. Kathy will be talking a little bit more about crossovers in her presentation, so I won't go too much into detail. This is where you will be editing the QC, the cruise QC flag. So when you click on that button, you'll get a page that shows you all the cruise QC flags that have already been set. In case this is updated cruise, so there aren't any QC flags, you'll want to submit the QC for the region that you're involved with. In this case, we'll submit it for the coastal. We'll just look at the coastal region. The reviewer name is hard-coded, so this is your SOCAT login information that you've logged into the page with. This will allow us to track who's making the QC edits. And there's a whole list of new QC criteria that Kathy will also talk about. I'll just show you real quick that what we've done is we enter a value, we click a radio button under one of these categories, a comment will automatically get generated and put into the QC comment. This is to help us have sort of complete comments tracking with the QC flags that are created. And again, Kathy will talk a little bit more, much more about this in her presentation. And let's see, the last thing on the table of cruises that I wanted to show you was that there is the link to the thumbnail plot for each individual cruise, so that you can go directly from the table of cruises into the thumbnail plot. And I'll show you that as soon as the table of cruises reloads here. So if we're interested, while we're doing the QC, we might want to go right into the thumbnails. We can go ahead and click on thumbnail plot for that particular cruise. You'll see that expo code is the only one that's loaded up in this page, and then we go ahead and draw all the thumbnail plots that we're interested in. And again, if we see something that looks quirky or strange, we can click on that individual plot and go right into the correlation viewer and then start sort of investigating what is going on with that data. Basically, what I wanted to present, hopefully that's a good introduction into the use of the system, and Kathy will take over in a minute here and give you an idea about QCing and how to do that. But first, I'd like to take any questions, if there are any questions after seeing that introduction.
Kathy, and I have a question. You know how to download one cruise worth of data. I'm wondering if there's a way to download several cruises into an Excel file or a NetCDF.
Yes, there is actually. So on this page that I'm showing right now, we have the various 178 cruises that are shown on this. We can hit the Save As button, and then you can select NetCDF or ASCII or CSV and download it that way. To your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. On that page, you should print out the radio, the checkbox about all the variables. So
on the download page?
No, on the Save As.
Oh, yeah, save it. Sorry, folks, for those on the other line, that's Roland Schweitzer. He is the main developer of the Live Access Server system that I'm showing, and he made a very good point. That include all the variables in your download when you're downloading the data. Make sure to click that Include All Variables button. If you don't do that, the only variable that will be downloaded will be the particular variable you're looking at. On plot, in this case, is FCO2 recommended. Okay, Kathy, over to you. I'll share my screen with you.
Okay.
Oh, here we are. Make presenter.
Thank you, Ken, very much for that introduction, and I just want to say I had a chance over the last couple of weeks to work with the new interface, the new system as an end user, and have to just give kudos to the technical team because it's really nice. Nicely done. Okay, so Kevin covered these topics on our agenda, and now I'm going to review some of the QC steps. And first of all, I'd like to just give a quick overview of the overall goals of the QC project, and a lot of this might be review for the seasoned QCs out there, but I know we have some new people as well. So these are the primary goals from Benjamin Field's his paper 2012. And the QC effort is going to focus on this goal here, which focuses on the QC of the cruises and the metadata. And in order to assess data, we need to look at individual cruises and determine the accuracy of the sensor used, the completeness of the metadata, and make an assessment of the accuracy of FCO2 seawater. And that requires looking at several different parameters that some of which are listed here. Luckily, the SOCAT team has provided some resources that are very, very useful, particularly the QC cookbook and the recent paper by Wanikoff about alternative sensors. So I highly recommend, if you're QCing, perhaps even print out the QC cookbook. I think it's only 13 pages, and it summarizes everything very nicely. Let's see here. Let me see if I can go back to the front page. This is the live view. Here's the QC cookbook. And if you scroll down, there's an explanation of how to, of all the flags, the criteria necessary to assign flags, and there's this very handy table here on page 2 that details all of the flags and what to look for as you're going through each cruise. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, what's necessary to as a flag of A. So if you're looking at a cruise, in order for the cruise to receive a flag of A, the calculated FCO2 seawater at SST has to be better than 2 microatmospheres. Quality crossover must be present. Must have followed approved SOP criteria, and the metadata must be complete. So what does that mean? A high quality crossover, here's the criteria, and I recommend that you look at Rick's paper that I just showed you on the front page of the SOCAT interface. It goes into very nice detail about what's required for a crossover. As Kevin just showed, there's a tool built into the QC interface that actually checks this for you, which is really nice. Approved methods, SOP criteria are listed here. I'll give you just a minute to read through. These are the criteria that you need to look for as you're QCing individual cruises. So some of it you'll be able to discern from looking at the actual data. A lot of it you'll discern from looking at the metadata, which is why it's so important that the metadata documentation is complete. So the metadata must contain all of this information. Occasionally, so if you have a good feel for what goes into flag A to a cruise, then everything builds on that, all of the other cruises. Sometimes some of this information might not all be present, but a lot of it will. All of the other flags kind of build on that. So a flag B meets all the criteria, all this criteria for a flag A, except there's no high quality crossover. A flag C meets all of the criteria except no high quality crossover, and FCO2 seawater is better than 5 microatmospheres instead of 2 microatmospheres. A flag D, the metadata is incomplete, but everything else is there. The rest of the flags are, the majority of the cruises that you'll look at will be flag A through D. And then there are some other flags for other parameters, particularly moorings that are alternative sensors. And I recommend that you see the cookbook and Rick's paper for a lot of detail on that. Let me go back to the interface here. This is Rick's paper on alternative sensors, and it's definitely worth reading through, especially if you will be QCing moorings or any entry in the SOCAT database that is using alternative sensors. Also, you might come across cruises that meet all of the criteria for a SOCAT flag, but you'll see in some of the data that there might be some outliers. And the sanity checker that the SOCAT technical team put in place catches most of those, which is really nice, but you still might see an errant sea surface temperature or position information, date, etc. So there is a way to flag individual data points in the cruises. But please note when you're doing that you're flagging the FCO2 value, and anything that you flag with a flag other than 2 will not be included in the interface and in products. For instance, if you see salinity that is out of range, be a little bit careful about flagging that, because though salinity is used to calculate FCO2, it doesn't make as much of a difference as sea surface temperature or some of the other parameters. And new in this release is additional quality control based on temperature change for open ocean data, away from sea ice and large freshwater outflows. So these are additional criteria that you need to take into account when evaluating those types of cruises. And this information is also in the cookbook. Both of these paragraphs are covered there. Okay, so that's an overview of the overall goals and the resources, and Kevin also mentioned online tutorials that are on the main interface of the SOCAT homepage. So before we go into some interactive examples, I'm wondering if there are any questions. So let's go ahead and look at some interactive examples. This is building on what Kevin has already shown us. We go into the editor. I've already signed in. And Kevin did a nice job of describing all the different ways to find cruises. For this particular example, I'm going to zoom in on this little area here. And I'm only going to look for cruises in this region that are new and need to be QC'd. So I'll hit update plot. Take a couple minutes, seconds rather. And here are the new cruises in this region. So we'll go ahead and click on the list of cruises, and this is the really nice interface now that Kevin just showed us. So if we want to look at some of these cruises here, we'll take a look at this first one. Click on the thumbnail icon to view all the data, and here I see that this may be a flyer right here. It might be an outlier. It's way out of range of the other parameters around it. So this is where it's very handy to use these tools that Kevin just showed about looking at the data in different ways. You might want to look at FCO2 as a function of time, a function of sea surface temperature is handy. So I go ahead and update the plot and see if it correlates. Well, it still looks like it might be a flyer. You might want to see if that's close to land, where it could be a lot more variable. I'd say this might be a flyer here. So you can go ahead and hide it, and then flags over here, and you have highlighted will come up in this table. And here you can choose the WOS QC flag to edit. I think that this is probably a 4. I'm not sure that I would want to include that, but this is up to whoever's QCing this cruise to decide. I'm going to click on one. If there was a list of them, you can choose all or none. And then you go ahead and save the flags, and that gets put into the database. So this particular data point will no longer appear in the interface or any SOCAT products. I'm not going to actually save the flags because this is not the region that I usually QC. I'm just using this as an example. So I have to, I didn't mean that. Okay, well, this is good. In order to save this, I actually have to put a comment in here describing why I am changing a flag. Okay. Back to the here, and this is where you can assess all of the different parameters. I'm with that. And I also want to check for crossovers, and this is a very handy tool. It does the checking actually for you. No crossovers are found. I want to look at the documentation. This is something that I've run into. Before you look at the documentation here, make a note of the Expo code because the documentation is based on the Expo code. So I made a note of that. I'll go ahead and look at the documentation here. And here's the documentation for this particular cruise. An Excel file, and it has all of the information in here. If I were QCing this cruise, I would look at this very closely and make sure that all of the parameters are met. And if not, I would check with the full flags in the cookbook and make a determination on which flag this particular cruise should get. Okay. So we'll go and take a look at another one, just for example's sake. And if there are any questions, please go ahead and interrupt me at any time. And here's the flag for salinity, but I might be a little careful about flagging that. However, it also appears in the difference between equilibrator temperature and sea surface temperature, which is a good diagnostic. I would look to that particular data point a little more closely to see if that should receive a WOS flag. And documentation.
Hey, this is Nolan. It occurs to me that I should change the link target on the documentation to be targeted to a new tab. So
yes,
you don't have to
I agree. That would be very nice.
Forth, but you get around my oversight by right-clicking and saying open in a new tab while you're working.
Okay.
And then you won't have this issue of flipping back and forth, trying to remember what thing you were looking at.
That would be nice if it opened in a new tab.
Yeah, I can make that change. I don't know how long it'll take to filter through the system, but I can certainly make the change.
Super. So go ahead and look at the documentation for this cruise. And you see that there are two different pieces of documentation. So if I click on this one, it'll bring up the documentation from CDAC. And it looks like this contains a lot of very detailed information, which is good. That's what we want to see when we are QCing these cruises. And I also noticed that there was another document here. So I can open that, and that is a cruise report from the investigator. So this interface is very, very nice. The detailed information is provided in the documentation tab. So you may find some of the information in one of the documents for this particular Expo code, and you might find the rest of the information in another document. So it's worth looking at the various pieces that go with that Expo code. Okay, and I'll just look at one last example. Okay. Let's see here. Just check for that one of these has crossovers. I think this is the one that has a crossover. Oh, perhaps not. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm QCing this particular cruise. I've looked at the thumbnails and I've made a decision based on the data. I've looked at the documentation and I want to check for crossovers. And this one, there is a crossover, so I can click on that and it actually gives me a plot of the crossovers, which is really, really nice. So that's Kevin and Roland, do you want to say anything more about the crossover tool?
Real quickly, I'd like to say something. Judith Hauk had a question. And note, apparently most people from Europe are having troubles dialing into the audio portion of the meeting. So they are watching the screen but can't actually hear what's going on. But hopefully the recording will help enlighten them after we're done. But the question was getting the values, the data for a crossover. So if you could show them how you, from here, click on the data table there, the data button, and that will bring up the data that is for the cruises that are involved in the crossover, and you can then download the files as a CSV file or as a tab separated file by those links.
Very nice.
So that's how you get to the data from the crossover. And the other question that Judith had was about estimating accuracy. My understanding is that accuracy has to be in the actual metadata. Isn't that right?
Yes, it does. That's correct.
It has to be in the metadata. There's no estimation done from the data itself.
That's correct, yes.
It has to be part of the metadata. Great, thanks. So those were Judith's 2 questions.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to use this as an example to actually edit the QC flag. If there is a crossover, I would just go ahead and copy that expo code because you will need that. So let's go ahead and this example here. Again, here's my name, as Kevin pointed out. That's hard-coded in, which is really nice. Let's say that it met all of the criteria for receiving a flag of A or a B, and it followed the approved methods and SOP criteria. The data is complete, the data quality is acceptable, and we did find a high-quality crossover. And here I'm going to go ahead and say which one it is. And as Kev pointed out, everything that you click up here is put in this comment already, and you can go ahead and submit your flag with this comment here, or if you want to, here we'll go ahead and submit it as an A. I'm not going to actually submit this because, again, this isn't the region I usually work in. And if I have additional comments about this particular cruise, this is where to enter it, and it's very, very helpful to have as much information as possible when you're QCing these cruises. So please use this additional comments box as much as you see fit. It's very helpful when other people are looking at the data. Some of the data crosses into coastal regions, so it might be QC'd in one region, say in the Atlantic, and then the coastal folks are looking at the data as it crosses into the coastal regions. And if you've already QC'd it and you found some particular information that you want to share, very, very, very helpful to have that in the additional comments box.
Hey, Kathy, this is Kathy?
Yeah.
This is Arulson speaking. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Unique crossovers that's been found in your data set so far?
Kevin and Roland?
I didn't have that answer, no. We could do a crossover analysis, but I don't think we've done that yet.
And the second thing I was wondering about is, how did you determine that crossover you found was high quality? I didn't see that. Maybe I just lost that.
I don't have the answer to...
Is Carl there?
Yeah. So are you asking, well, press that button to check for high quality crossovers.
Yeah.
It does the calculation on the fly at that time.
Does it show up in a window? Can you track that, Kathy?
It showed the expo code if it found one.
But it doesn't show the difference?
No. For it checks that if it is a high quality crossover. So it does check that the FCO2 is within range, that the SST is within range, and this long lat time formula is within range.
But it doesn't show the actual
But
difference.
It doesn't show the actual
I think that would be useful to add, to show the mean difference in FCO2 or mean difference in sea surface temperature, if it's possible.
Okay.
Would be affirmative, actually, to have that value.
Well, one thing I did notice, every once in a while we've had a mess up where it's basically a duplicate cruise. So I do ask that if you do see a crossover, to actually at least go to this map to see that they do look different. If you see one cruise line and realize it's the same cruise, you know, that it's crossing over in the same way, if we saw a number and the crossover were all exactly 0, we'd become very suspicious.
Yeah. But it would be good to get a like mean diff value of in absolute and for temperature, like a figure showing the crossover in themselves, differences in FCO2, because I don't think that would be much more informative for my action, because then I would be able to see with my own eyes that the differences are acceptable. Yeah.
Okay. Last comment about the documentation. I'm going to click on this one for the Ron Brown, and you can see there's a long list of documentation that goes with the Ron Brown, which is great. And my understanding is that sometimes an investigator will provide documentation for several cruises. So, for instance, the 2011 cruises, the codes are different for every cruise because every cruise is assigned its own expo code, but this documentation is the same for these 4 cruises. That makes sense. Also, just talking about the crossovers, again, I want to refer you to Rick's paper because there's a lot of really good detail about crossovers in that paper. Okay. I think we're everything up. When you are QCing the data and you have questions, I think the best route to go is first check with the regional group leads, and they're all listed here. They're also on the SOCAT homepage, and I think can contact any of the technical team. If there's issues with the actual interface, please contact Kevin and Carl. And Kevin and Carl, do you have any other comments about that?
We'll put in the presentation the email address is great. I should copy that right now. Well, I guess I can't do it right now because it's socat.support@noaa.gov. So on the front page of the SOCAT homepage, when you log into the SOCAT system through the PMEL virtual network, link on the bottom that is a contact link for socat.support@noaa.gov, and that's where questions or problems for the interface should go.
So it's right here, right? No, this is, where's the, Kevin? It is. Here it is, right here. Okay, I think this concludes our webinar. Question and answer session can start now if there are any additional questions.
Kathy, this is Rick Vandenkoff.
Hi, Rick.
I want to follow up on the question that Ara had posed regarding the crossovers. So can you actually, when you get a good crossover, can you actually get the plots of the 2 cruises? The nil plots, because I think in the previous version that had that.
Let's see here. I'm going to look crossover that I found. I think this was it. Carol, that's a question for you guys and Roland.
We'll go ahead and click on that. The plot you're talking about, Rick, or are you talking about?
Can you at point get the thumbnails of those of those 2 cruises overlaid on each other?
So you have overlaid on each other.
That used to be that you basically could plot the 2 cruises versus space.
I guess so. I don't think we can do that now, but we'll definitely put that on our list to make that happen.
Because here are concerned. Some of the when you do time-space criteria, something that a computer can do very well. I think there can be some ambiguity when you actually try to do compare the temperatures or FCO2s.
From this plot, you could, change what you're plotting at this one plot. To get to the full thumbnails of everything, we'd need to run that. But so with plot, you could change it instead of latitude versus longitude, color by time. You can, select whatever you want to see. It keeps all those constraints that are set up.
Sort of takes care of our concerns here, really. I didn't know that.
So that is, Rick, does solve your, answer your problem, your question?
Yeah, why do you just for kicks just plot it versus latitude? CO2 versus latitude. That gives you some idea. You just go through the plot, but it could give some idea where you are in the crossover.
Okay.
But is this is the main difference between these data calculated in the live access server, and if it's in the limit, that sort of makes it a good crossover?
Well, you're saying main difference. We're actually looking at point-wise differences.
Point-wise differences. Yeah, the live access server determines that is less than accurate.
So it's go along the points along each cruise, and if they're used within limits, if the SSTs are within limits, and then computes the distance time formula between the 2 points, and if that falls within, it might as yes, we found a crossover. You continue on to see if there's anything better.
Yeah.
So when you see the original plot, it had some highlighted point. That was the one that it found was the best as far as the distance time formula, still meeting the FCO2 and the SST criteria.
Yeah. But when it's figure, I don't think it looks that we're exactly on top of each other. So it would be good to get the mean value of the differences printed to the screen.
The value difference along the entire length of those cruises.
So you have, I don't know, some kinds of crossover points for these two cruises, and each has a difference in those.
Okay.
Just some region around this?
Or just wherever they're a good match.
Whenever
we accumulate, we don't accumulate them, we just find the minimum.
Minimum difference. Or the minimum distance.
The minimum distance. So, in that falls in there, we could keep it and accumulate a mean of the difference of the temperature and the FCO2.
Yeah, that would be nice to have, that value.
Okay, well, I'll put that on the features now that I understand what it seems simple enough.
Yeah, Rick Vonnegut again. Do you know of the crossovers that meet the time distance criteria, how many get rejected because of bad FCO2s or differing FCO2s?
No.
My feeling is it probably would be large.
It is. Well, I mean, just empirically from developing the software, it more often than not that seems to be what happened.
So, but that actually brings up another question: is does indication of a bad crossover would be useful to know as well?
Yeah.
When I checked the V2 cruises versus so what we're calling just regular crossovers in V2, so this didn't have the FCO2 and delta time criterion. And then check those versus, so paired in V3, which are high quality. and about half of those drop out. So either FCO2 or the SE, or the possibility we might have been still needing crossovers of a cruise with another leg of the same cruise.
But I guess for QC purposes, it would be useful to know if there was a crossover based on time, time space, that did not meet the other criteria. Because that would immediately give a, immediately would say, okay, that can't be an A cruise. So you're showing the possible A cruises, but you're not showing the ones that are not.
So you want to see, well, so you have a crossover that doesn't meet the FCO2, but then you have another, luckily, to have another crossover that does meet the FCO2. You want to see both of those?
No, I just think, well, you could. I was just thinking about certain cruises that have a crossover which don't meet criteria, which should sort of raise a flag to the QCer that, one of these two cruises might have some issues.
Okay. Well, we could, this version, but we could add another, low crossover, sort of similar to this high quality crossover. Push the button or whatever. That'd be about my only on that one.
Low quality, but you could just say crossover and crossover versus high quality crossover. But
Yeah, okay.
Those are meant as a QC tool, and so now you're basically just looking at, one half of the QC, component.
Yeah.
Having a crossover where they don't meet that suggests that one of the two cruises has some issues.
So you go check and, oh, well, this other one is a D cruise, so maybe that's the reason.
Yeah.
So my estimate of this being a B cruise is probably okay.
Questions? Okay. We have been recording this webinar, so we'll make this available online. And please contact us if you have any questions as you venture to the QC process for this new version of SOCAT.
Yep. Thanks for joining in.